Ya Ali Madad, and welcome to the Ismaili Esoteric Study Circle. Before we begin, a heartfelt thank you to each of you who has joined and supported this journey of illumination. Every insight shared, every reflection kindled, every spark of light that reaches a soul exists because of your love and presence. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the Ismaili Esoteric Study Circle channel and tap the bell icon so you never miss an episode. Share this reflection with your family and friends because sometimes one spark of divine wisdom can light another soul's journey toward awakening. Today, we reflect on a luminous and deeply personal moment. The London youth Mulaqat Farman of Mawlana Shah Rahim al-Hussaini delivered on February 2, 2026, a message where the Imam invites every soul to awaken intellect, live in light, and serve humanity as an act of love.
Thank you so much for having me. It's an absolute privilege to be here today to unpack this. And I really think the word unpack is quite literal today because we're looking at something incredibly dense.
Yeah, dense is definitely the right word. Usually on these deep dives, we're looking at historical chronicles or, maybe a specific philosophical treatise from the 10th century. But this source material is really different.
It is.
We are looking at a blueprint for the architecture of the soul, specifically drawn from that Farman delivered earlier this month. And honestly, just reading through the notes, it feels less like a traditional sermon and more like a survival manual.
That's a really great way to frame it. While the title specifically mentions youth, if you actually engage with the text, which addresses decision-making, mental health, the physics of time, and the metaphysics of eternity, you realize pretty quickly this isn't just advice for teenagers navigating university applications.
Right.
It's a universal architecture. It's for literally anyone trying to keep their head above water in a completely chaotic world.
Which, let's be honest, is all of us right now. I mean, the world in 2026 isn't exactly a calm place.
Not at all.
So let's just dive right into the foundation of this blueprint. The sources highlight a core metaphor that honestly, it kind of changes how you look at your daily schedule. They call it faith as the central axis.
Yes, this is where the engineering of the soul really begins. The text quotes the Farman saying, "Let faith be the central axis around which the rest of your life revolves." Now, we really need to pause on the physics of that statement, because an axis isn't just a static pole you stick in the ground to mark your territory.
Right. Thinking mechanically, an axis is the thing that determines rotation.
Exactly. It determines balance. If you are an engineer building a wheel or a turbine, you know that if the axis is off-center, even by a millimeter, the object doesn't just spin, it wobbles.
And then as it speeds up, that wobble turns into a destructive force.
It eventually shakes the whole machine apart. And the source material makes a really crucial distinction here. The Imam isn't saying faith is something you just check in on occasionally, like glancing at a compass during a long hike. He's saying it must determine the actual direction and the stability of the rotation itself.
So practically speaking, that means every decision, career moves, relationships, even how I spend my Friday night, all of that needs to spin around that one center.
That is the architectural ideal, yes. But here is the problem the sources identify, and I think this is where it gets uncomfortably relatable for all of us. We are currently living in a multi-axis world.
I found this section of the analysis so fascinating because it puts a name to a feeling I think everyone listening right now probably has. Realistically, we don't feel like we have one center. We feel like we have about 5 or 6.
Or 10. The analysis points out that for modern youth, and frankly for adults too, there are these massive gravitational forces constantly competing to be your axis. Social media wants to be the axis regarding how you see yourself. Peer approval wants to be the axis for your behavior. Ambition, fear, the economy.
Yeah, they're all fighting for that center spot.
Exactly.
And if we go back to that physics analogy, if you have 2 or 3 different axes trying to spin the same wheel, you're just going to tear the wheel apart.
That is literally the definition of modern stress. The source material describes this state as being internally dispersed. You feel pulled in multiple directions because, metaphysically speaking, you actually are being pulled. You become one person at work, another person online, another person with your family. You just fragment.
It's exhausting just thinking about it, but the text offers a specific solution to this fragmentation, doesn't it? It mentions the qualb.
Yes, the spiritual heart. This is the esoteric layer of the whole concept. Faith is described in these texts as being gravitational. It's the only force strong enough to pull all those scattered impulses into coherence. When the qualb, or the heart, is aligned toward divine reality, everything else naturally falls into orbit.
So it gives you a center of gravity.
Precisely. Your job, your social life, your ambitions, they don't go away. They just start orbiting the right center.
Now, I can hear a skeptic or maybe just an ambitious young professional tuning in thinking, okay, but if I make faith my axis, does that mean I have to stop caring about my career? Do I have to go live in a cave somewhere?
Not at all. And the Farman is extremely clear on this point. It suggests that when faith is the axis, ambition doesn't disappear. It becomes ethical. Success doesn't corrupt your identity because your identity isn't based on the success anymore. It's based on the axis.
You stop spinning with every single trend.
Right. You start moving with intention. You control the rotation rather than the rotation controlling you.
That idea of moving with intention segues perfectly into the next pillar of this blueprint. And this was the part that really challenged my own definition of spirituality. The section is called Ethical Living as Invocation.
This represents a massive shift in definition. Usually when we hear the word invocation or prayer, we immediately have a very specific image in our minds.
Yeah, we think of a ritual space. We think of the Jamat, a prayer mat, a rosary, or a specific time of the day.
But the source quotes the Farman directly, saying, living within the ethical framework of our faith is a form of prayer. Think about the implications of that statement for a second. It completely dissolves the barrier between the sacred and the secular.
It means holding the door for someone is a prayer.
Yes.
Not lying on your resume is a prayer. Being patient in traffic when you are running 20 minutes late is a prayer.
Exactly. So it stops being about just being a nice person or following societal rules, and it starts being about actual spiritual mechanics. The expert analysis here calls it spiritual activation.
They use this beautiful analogy of the mirror, right?
Yes, the heart is a mirror. Every action you take, every single one either polishes that mirror or stains it.
So ethics is the polish.
Ethics is the tuning fork. If you act with truthfulness, the source says your soul aligns with truth, with hack. If you act with compassion, your soul aligns with mercy. You are actively tuning your internal frequency to the divine frequency.
And I assume the inverse is true. If I act with anger or deceit or pettiness, I'm just creating static.
You're creating internal dissonance. You are literally playing a chord that is out of tune with the universe. And the modern application section of the notes really hammers this home for the digital age.
Oh, the internet section. That part hit hard.
It should. Because there is this huge temptation today to separate our spiritual identity from our digital behavior. We think, well, I'm a spiritual person, but on Twitter or in the YouTube comment section, I could be a troll because it's anonymous. It doesn't count.
But the Farman completely removes that wall.
It does. It suggests that your character is your loudest prayer.
Your character is your loudest prayer. That is such a powerful line to sit with. It implies that the universe isn't just listening to the words you say during meditation. It's watching the signal you broadcast when you think nobody is looking.
Exactly. You cannot outcry a bad character. And that signal is what you are actually investing in, which connects directly to the third pillar the sources identify, which is the eternal soul. The notes call this metaphysical realism.
Realism is a really interesting word choice there. Usually people think of the soul as the abstract, airy-fairy part, and the body or the bank account as the real part.
But the argument here is based on simple logic, almost like a long-term investment strategy. Think about a portfolio. The body changes. It ages, it gets sick, eventually it expires, your reputation changes, your bank account fluctuates wildly. These are all highly volatile variables.
But the soul is the constant.
The soul is the only constant. So the question the source poses is essentially, why are we dumping 90% of our capital into the assets that are absolutely guaranteed to depreciate?
It's the ultimate bad trade. We spend so much energy on grades, on fitness, on social influence, and the text clarifies these aren't bad things inherently.
No, they are necessary tools for navigating this physical life, but they aren't the eternal thing.
There was a thought experiment in the notes that really gave me pause. It asked the reader, if today were your final day, would you wish you had strengthened your ego or your soul?
That really cuts through the noise, doesn't it? The source explains that the soul isn't just a passive passenger riding around inside the body. It is the locus of awareness. It ascends through refinement.
And the warning here is pretty stark. It says that neglect doesn't necessarily destroy the soul, but it prevents its elevation.
Right. You risk arriving at the next stage of existence spiritually malnourished.
That is a terrifying concept. Arriving malnourished for eternity because we were too busy feeding the ego here for a few decades.
It really puts things in perspective. And that is exactly why the fourth part of this architecture is so critical. Because we need a way to actually feed the soul in a world that is constantly distracting us from it. The blueprint calls this part Tasbih and inner balance.
Now, for anyone listening who might be uninitiated, Tasbih is often translated as the rosary or the repetition of prayer, but the analysis here reframes it completely. It moves away from just the idea of ritual and talks about it as psychological recalibration.
Which is vital in 2026. We're living in an era of constant, unrelenting stimulation. The notifications, the headlines, the deadlines, it is a fire hose of noise directly into our brains. The source describes Tasbih not as some ancient superstition, but as a deeply necessary mechanism for creating rhythm.
And rhythm creates order.
Yes. Rhythm creates order creates balance, and balance creates clarity. When you engage in remembrance, you aren't just repeating words blindly. You are deliberately slowing down the inner chaos. You are actively stepping out of the stream of noise to find the signal again.
So it's not an escape from reality. Because I think that's a very common critique. People say that meditation or prayer is just hiding from the real world.
The source is very firm on this. It is absolutely not an escape. It is a recalibration so that you can actually deal with reality. If you don't have that moment of stillness, you just absorb the chaos around you. You become purely reactive. You snap at your kids, you panic at the news, you get road rage. Tasbih restores the signal so you don't just react to the noise.
That distinction between reacting and acting brings us naturally to the next section, because reality is often very difficult. The blueprint has a specific section on resilience through difficulty.
And the directive here is incredibly blunt. Just 3 words. Do hard things.
It's so simple, but as humans, we are wired to do the exact opposite. We are biologically wired to seek comfort, to take the path of least resistance.
We are. But the source explains the spiritual view of difficulty as a process of refinement. Think about how a muscle grows. It literally needs resistance to build new tissue. The soul operates on the same principle. Hardship strips away our illusions. It exposes the ego.
Because when everything is going great, anyone can pretend to be patient or humble.
Exactly. It's easy to be a saint in paradise. But when things are hard, when you are under pressure, that is when you find out who you really are. The notes mention a binary nature of difficulty. Every single challenge you face is either a complaint or a refinement.
And that's a choice we make in the moment.
It is. When you face a tough exam, a difficult conversation with a partner, or a really heavy responsibility at work, you can complain. And complaining reinforces the ego and the sense of victimhood. Or you can view it as refinement, which polishes the soul.
There was a line in the source that I found haunting regarding this exact choice. It said that avoiding these challenges shrinks your future self.
A very powerful visual. If you run away from the awkward conversation today, you are slightly less capable tomorrow. You shrink. Resilience is spiritual courage. It's the capacity to endure pressure without losing your form.
Without losing that ethical alignment we talked about earlier.
Precisely.
So let's look at the structure we've built so far in this deep dive. We have the axis of faith, we have ethical action as prayer, we have the long-term investment in the soul, we have recalibration through tasbih, and now resilience. Where does all of this internal work actually lead?
It leads outward. Part 6 of the architecture is service.
The source uses a very specific, slightly scientific term here, centripetal counteraction. Can you unpack that for us?
Sure. Think about a centrifuge. It spins things out, it separates them, it pushes everything to the edges. The world we live in right now is centrifugal. It fragments people. It separates us by politics, by class, by opinion. It pushes us away from each other.
And service pushes back against that.
Service is centripetal. It pulls things toward the center, it brings people together. When you serve humanity, you are physically and spiritually fighting the fragmentation of the world.
But the text also emphasizes that we are fighting the fragmentation of the self.
Yes. This is the shift from consumer to contributor. Modern life treats us almost purely as consumers. We consume content, we consume products, we consume experiences. Even with spirituality, sometimes people just consume spirituality to feel good.
Right, like, give me my zen, make me feel better about my day.
Service completely flips the script. You stop asking, what can I get out of this? And you start asking, what can I give? And in that moment of giving, you expand the boundary of who you are. You are no longer just a small, isolated ego protecting your own interests. You become part of the whole.
It's the direct antidote to that shrunken self we just talked about.
Exactly. It broadens the capacity of the soul.
And finally, we arrive at the destination, the result of building this entire architecture. Part 7 is called Sustained Happiness.
This is the goal everyone is chasing, but the source makes a critical distinction between emotional excitement and ontological peace.
We confuse these two constantly, don't we? We think happiness is that quick dopamine spike when we get likes on a post or when we buy a new car.
But that's just excitement. It's biological, it's highly temporary, and most importantly, it's entirely dependent on external validation. If the likes stop coming in, the happiness stops. If the car gets a scratch on it, the source of your happiness suddenly creates suffering.
So what exactly is ontological peace?
It is stabilized happiness. It is a state of being that is independent of shifting circumstances. The Source describes it as a profound joy that is rooted in that central axis we started with.
So you can actually have this peace even if things are going completely wrong on the surface of your life.
You can have peace in the middle of a storm because your happiness isn't anchored in the waves, it's anchored in the bedrock. It's a structural stability, not a fleeting emotion.
When you step back and look at these points together, the Source calls it a complete architecture. It really is an interconnected system, isn't it?
It's a mechanism. The synthesis in the notes puts it beautifully. Let's look at the flow. Faith aligns the center, so that's your stability. Ethics refine the heart, that's your daily practice.
Remembrance nourishes the soul, that's your fuel.
Hardship strengthens capacity, that's your training. Service expands identity, that's your connection.
And finally, connection stabilizes happiness, which is the result. It's amazing how integrated it all is. If you pull just one piece out, say, you have service but no faith, what happens?
You eventually burn out. Or you might start doing the service purely for your own ego, just to look good to others. Or on the flip side, if you have remembrance but no ethics, you create that terrible dissonance we talked about. You become a hypocrite. It's a holistic blueprint. You really can't just pick the parts that are easy and ignore the rest.
And as the source material concludes, while this was delivered to the youth, it is ultimately preparation for eternity.
That's a truly profound place to land. It completely challenges the way we categorize our lives. We tend to put spiritual stuff in a Sunday box and real life in a Monday to Friday box. This blueprint says there is no box. The spiritual is the architecture of the real life.
And that implies that every single moment is an opportunity to build. Every decision you make is another brick in that architecture.
Every single one.
If every action is either polishing or staining the mirror, what does your reflection look like today? It's definitely something to chew on as we navigate the rest of our week. We would love to hear your thoughts. Question of the day. Which part of this architecture do you feel called to focus on this week? Please share your reflections in the comments below. If this reflection has touched your heart, let its light continue to guide you. Please subscribe to the Ismaili Esoteric Study Circle channel, like this episode, and share it with your loved ones so that the flame of divine knowledge continues to spread from one heart to another. Your presence here is not just support, it is partnership in light. Together we are building a world of compassion, unity, and understanding. May the Imam's eternal light guide your intellect, bless your heart, and illuminate your path. Until we meet again in another luminous episode, Ya Ali Madad.